Morley. Okay, here it is. You know, I always laugh that you can actually adjust your blood test results for cholesterol by eating a ton of cholesterol the day before. And this shows that there's a difference between what's in your tissues versus what's in your blood. And you touched on that. What does it mean? And let's talk about the lie that we need iron supplements. And does anybody need an iron supplement? Or is this misinformation about the lack of iron or low iron in our body because of a blood test?
Yeah, great question. And of course, I have a very strong opinion. And there are a lot of people who follow my work, but not everyone agrees with me, and that's fine. I love having spirited debate, but I'm going to get into the research, which makes some people really uncomfortable. But the thing is, this confusion about iron status started in the 1920s by studying pregnant women. Wow. So when you get into the research and you understand the physiology of pregnancy, what you find out is that during the course of the pregnancy, there is a dramatic change in minerals that takes place first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. And the probably one of the most important studies was from 1995, and it highlighted the fact that there is a natural hemodilution during the course of the pregnancy. That hemoglobin levels in the mother go down. Why are they going down? Because she has to make milk for the baby. Guess where they're going up? They're going up in the baby. No one's thinking about that. And so the key is it's like we're at a carnival, and there's a barker, and he's got the nuts, and he's moving them around, and people don't realize that the concept of iron deficiency anemia is based on hemodilution that occurs naturally in the woman's body. And the key is getting people to realize that there's a specific reason for that. And the confusion is that iron in the blood is very different than iron in the tissue. And they're not the same. And so Bruce Ames, a world-renowned physiologist at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, at one point was the most quoted scientist on planet Earth. So he's not some rogue scientist, like has a goofy opinion. He's like one of the most respected scientists. And in 2004, he and his colleague, Dr. Kalilia, studied iron status in the blood versus iron status in the tissue. And what they discovered is that there's a 10-fold increase in iron status in the tissue that doesn't show up in the blood work. That's where the confusion is. And so people just think that the blood work is perfectly representative of iron status all over my body. No, it's not. It's representative of what's in your blood. And it's a very different world out there when we get into the tissue. And people are not aware. This study that was done was based on a couple 100,000 pregnant women. It wasn't 4 people. It was a lot of pregnant women who demonstrated that the hemodilution is very much alive. And what they discovered is that hemoglobin in a pregnant woman's body should be somewhere between 8.5 and 9.5. Not the mandated, it's got to be 12, or at the very least, it's got to be 10. If it's not 10, then we're going to have to take you to the hospital, and you can't have a home birth. And people don't know the games that are being played with the metrics. And so very important to know that there's more to the story. And that's really what we learned over the last couple of years. There's more to the story. We've learned to ask better questions. We've learned to be very insistent to get better answers because we know we're not getting the full story. And so it's important for people to realize that low iron in the blood means low iron in the blood. And what really runs our body is an iron recycling system. Most people don't know about it. And so every second of every day, every second, we have to replace 2.5 million red blood cells. So you and I have been talking for 35 minutes times 60 times 2.5 million. It's a really important activity that the body engages in. And in the course of 24 hours, it's 200 billion red blood cells that need to be replaced. It's a really big deal. But here's the fascinating part of it. The amount of iron needed to support the replacement of 200 billion red blood cells, you think it would be like bazillions and bazillions, and it's 25 milligrams, 25. And what will further confound your listeners is to find out that 24 of those 25 milligrams of iron come from a recycling system that's run by copper. 1 milligram a day is supposed to come from our diet. It's not my idea. It's Robert Crichton and Douglas Kell and Gutterich and Hallowell and these preeminent iron biologists all agree that we accumulate about 1 milligram of iron every day we're on the planet. And people don't know that. And so they don't know that iron starts to build up in the liver and it starts to really create an energy crisis in that Rife machine. Rife machine's got to have energy, right? Well, it doesn't work if there's too much iron. And people are just not aware of the intimate relationship between copper and iron, especially as it relates to this iron recycling program, because what's critical is a series of cells. They're called recycling macrophages. Macrophages are the Pac-Man that gobble up all the dying tissue. Can't live without them. And they need to be able to release the iron that they accumulate during the course of their work. And there's an iron doorway. It's called ferroportin iron doorway. And here's the part that's fascinating. The doorman is a copper doorman. If copper is not ready and available to open up that doorway, the iron can't get out, and then it starts to create imbalance, and it starts to lead to misinterpretation of what's happening in iron and copper and other mineral status. And what people don't know is that as iron accumulates in the mitochondria, and it does, there can be a 40% loss of energy, 60%, 80% loss, 96%, depending upon the conditions that are set up in the study. And so no one told us that iron is very disruptive to the mechanics and the machinery of iron recycling. And it's one of the most important things for people to understand, especially women who have a menstrual cycle. Why? Because a lot of women think that if they have heavy menstrual loss, it's called dysfunctional uterine bleeding, DUB, they think they're going to bleed out and die. And that's what they're told. Well, you got to have iron because you've got a heavy menstrual cycle. No. It turns out there's a team of scientists in India, just in 2014, did something no one had ever done. They measured ceruloplasmin status against the thickness of the endometrial wall in the uterus. And the thicker the wall, the more bleeding and the lower the ceruloplasmin is, which means copper is not bioavailable. And it's an earth-shattering study that I think should be central to the conversation on social media, but it's hard to get people excited about something as dry as that.
So you're saying someone with endometriosis probably needs to start supplementing or looking into taking some copper. Is that the connection that you were saying?
I'm not saying it. I'm basing it on 20 articles that I've read.
Right.
It's very clear in the literature what the metabolic problem is in endometriosis. It is not a disease. It is a copper deficiency that causes iron buildup in the tissue. And when ceruloplasmin is low, estrogen rises. Well, what does estrogen like to do? Estrogen and iron like to make things big. And that's why the tissue starts to get thick. It's so simple, but people don't know these dynamics.
So all of this iron that's building up in our bodies, why would anyone be taking an iron supplement on top of that?
Because they believe the narrative that they are iron deficient, not knowing the difference between iron in the blood versus iron in the tissue. And it's very important. It's a nuance to iron dynamics that's not taught in doctor school.